November 3rd, 1969, Gordon Poles, James Peters, if I was correct, and yourself, you were starting this ministry. Actually, you were doing the ministry before then, but that's when you actually had the building that you rented, that you did the ministry out of. And from what I understand, you were a part of this ministry, began the ministry, and were a part of it from that time for about 2 years. So how long was that period that you were there?
Yeah, it was interesting because during that time, just to try to make a little bit more money, one pastor had invited me to do their youth group, and they lived in a different area. I had to drive. I think every Sunday, Joanna and I had to drive about 50 miles in our old beat up Volkswagen van to get there. And many times we would leave with not knowing if we had enough gas to even get there, to the meeting. And then if somebody didn't offer us money to get back on, we wouldn't be able to get home. And but again, I think it was a time in life where God was teaching me that I couldn't trust myself, but I could trust Him. So when we would run out of food, I would just ask God to supply it, and He would supply it. If we ran out of gas money, we'd tell Him before we left, we don't have any money. So God, if you want us to come back this week, the way we're going to do it. And so I did that little youth teaching thing. Today I think they call them youth pastors, but back then you were just a youth leader. And then I went to another one later, but so in between those, I actually left the school after the school year, probably pretty discouraged actually, and left maybe right in 71. And so went back to California, and I started doing some, Joanna and I started doing a Bible study at a local high school, the one that we had gone to. And we had just a few students, but we went there early in the morning and we met in my van and we had a Bible study for these 3 or 4 students. And then they started inviting other people, and then, people were meeting us, and pretty soon we had a bigger crowd than my van could hold. And so one of them asked his teacher if they could use the classroom before school started.
Wait, did you say you're meeting in a van?
Yes.
Is that the picture behind you?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me show you that. It's kind of interesting. It's the one we drove back to Michigan in, and the second time we went to Michigan. So this is the van that we.
Oh yeah, nice.
So the group that we had in the Bible study in California, they painted this one summer. We had about 70. We ended up with about 70 kids in this group. That we went to a biology teacher's classroom, and one of the kids led him to Christ, their biology teacher. And so during the summer, that group had evolved into a Monday night Bible study with about 70 high school students. So I didn't know anything about Youth for Christ or any of the organizations that were going on at that time. So we just started a Bible study, basically. And again, didn't have a great theological background at that time either. Just, 1.5 years maybe of the Bible college. But God used that. A lot of these young people were saved, and this Bible study grew. And so we were pretty excited. But at that time, I wanted to go back and try to finish my education at the Bible school that I had left. So we left the fish. The fish continued. It got, I mean, it became a lot more organized after I left, for sure. And I think that's where Dan came in, because I remember stopping in there one time after I got back to the school and met Dan. They were giving a Bible study at, it was at a different location, but still the underground fish.
Wow.
So I think some local pastors had gotten involved and gave some direction. And Dan was just obviously God's choice to lead this ministry and do to what it became eventually, which was amazing. When I hear the stories, I'm just absolutely thrilled. But you realize that God can strike a straight blow with a crooked stick. You don't have to be perfect to be used.
Yeah.
And then you realize too that when he says that he basically uses the foolish things of this world to confound the wise, it's really true. I was one of those foolish things. And so God did use that to jumpstart the fish. But then by the time I left, I was on life support. So,
got it. Wow.
There you go. So when I came back, it was good to see that it has started again, but I didn't get back involved with it. Basically, I took a little job at a Christian Reformed church at that time, and was doing their youth. That would have been in '72.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you stayed in Michigan for some time, and then you headed down to Arkansas, and that's where you completed your education and became a family marriage counselor. Worked with Dr. Ed Wheat. We mentioned Dr. Ed Wheat earlier,
Let me go back for a minute.
Okay.
There was another man who was really instrumental in my life, and that was a fellow named Ed Drake. Ed Drake was a music guy.
Oh, yes.
He made albums, and that was all the folk music time. Even the Christian music was like folk music. And so Ed had written some great songs that I still appreciate today. And Ed was just, I met him, he had just gotten out of the service. He was another older guy. He was like 25 probably. But he had gone to college and finished his degree and hooked up with us down at the Fish during that first year.
Oh, wow.
And so Ed and I stayed in touch through the years. And when we left Bible college the second time, we went back to California, but we did a visit to my father-in-law's ranch in Arkansas. It was actually central Arkansas, north central. And next door to him was a little 80-acre house and barn and nice little place for cattle and horses. And we ended up buying that. Joanna and I didn't have a lot of money even at that time, but we bought this whole thing for $11,400, and we were going to try to start a little study center. And by that time, we were reading Schaeffer and seeing what they were doing with the Liberty Fellowship, and it seemed like a good idea to try to do some ministry there. And Ed was involved in helping out there.
So Ed Drake moved to Arkansas.
Oh yeah, he moved there and worked out of Arkansas for a while. He ended up going with Youth for Christ and spent his life, gave his life to young people. But that's where Bill Burnside came out, and he taught at the study center that we had. We would have groups coming down. Ed would bring most of the groups from Michigan, and they would come down, and we would go through studies with them. And then from there, we saw some great things happen there as well. But the fish continued, and that was as I look back, I thank God that He is a lot more sovereign than any of our choices.
Yeah.
When He wants to do a work, He's going to use anybody to do it. But if He's using you, you need to be satisfied with what He's doing. You need to understand that you can be replaced in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. So do the work that God calls you to, and don't veer off in any other path. When He wants to move you, He moves you. And I've seen that happen. He moved us from central Arkansas, where not a lot was happening, to northwest Arkansas, where I met Ed Wheat through one of those early introductions to Bill Burnside, who was a wonderful professor, a wonderful person. And he told us about this little Bible church in Springdale, where you kids first started going when you moved up to that area in northwest Arkansas. And then I met Dr. Wheat just as I was finishing my doctorate, and he invited me to come into practice there. So,
wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing. That is amazing.
And that was really supposed to be my life's work, but I didn't know that all the other stuff I had to go through in life was, and most of it was a self-imposed plight, but the other things I had to go through, I needed to go through to be able to help families and couples, and the struggles you have when things aren't right are amazing, So I remember that after Ed Wheat died, your sister Melissa, our oldest, was having lunch one day with your mom, and Mrs. Wheat was in a table close to them, and so they went over, of course, and talked to Mrs. Wheat. And Melissa said this to Mrs. Wheat. She said, "Mrs. Wheat, I've always wanted to say this." She said, "Thank you so much for coming alongside my parents. You saved our family." Mm-hmm. And really, it's true. Mm-hmm. The counsel that I received from Ed Wheat, the understanding of how to be a good husband, a good father, and hopefully a good grandfather and great-grandfather, he mentored me in all of that. So it was a place I had to be. And he was the perfect person to help bring me along from a University of Arkansas graduate.
Wow, that is it's amazing, how the Lord led you from California and into faith, into Vietnam, and then to Michigan, to be involved in those things. And it's like you said, it's the Lord's work. He truly is the one that uses those that are willing just to step out and do it. And then what my observation, just, I've never been to see the underground fish. I remember as a kid, we visited one of your friends in Michigan. I was probably 6, 7, 8, 9. I can't remember. So I have vague memories, but I don't remember, seeing.
He was one of the guys that was saved down there, actually.
Is that right?
Interesting. Yeah. It is amazing what God can do. But Jacob, like I've told you many times, I am such a flawed person. That gives me hope for anybody.
Right.
When I saw these people on the streets there, I loved them, and I wanted them to come to faith. I wanted them to realize that they didn't have to live on drugs and alcohol and make all of those same choices over and over again, that there was a person who could come into their life and change their lives. And it wasn't me. It was God Almighty. Jesus wanted to change people, and he's still in that same work today, using flawed people to help flawed people. And, I don't think there's a sin in the Bible I haven't committed, but I know this, I know that God has directed my life from that decision I made. I had to go through a lot of heartache because of my stupidity and just not knowing enough about life and about the enemy we have.
Yeah, but my observation is that, the Lord, if you're willing to take that step out there and do what He's calling it, it's His work, and it seems like, He gives His servants, His children, the privilege to serve Him in different ways, and not everybody is always obedient to the call. But if you are, obviously in this case with you, Gordon Poles, James Peters, Ed Drake, Howard Good, Dan Dinsmore, each one of, God just, it's His work. He's growing His kingdom, and all of you were faithful to that call. And for the city of Grand Rapids, He loves all cities. And what I think is interesting is that he is calling people up in every part of the world to reach their neighborhoods, their cities, the dangerous areas of their cities. If that would have been considered a dangerous area of Grand Rapids at the time, it sounds like it was. The Lord wants us to reach every part, because He does care for the world and loves the world and chooses to use us. And so there's a lot of good lessons and observations from this.
Well, thank you, Jacob. God taught me a lot through all those experiences, but the main thing He's taught me is that He's holy, and He wants us to be holy.
Holy.
Yeah. And you know what? We have to submit our body, like you've said many times, every part of our body to the Lord Jesus Christ, not leave anything out there that's not committed fully to doing His will, and to sort of like Spurgeon talks about in his young life, that he never thought he was going to be a great preacher. He was just satisfied with handing out tracts to people in the slums.
That's good.
And he felt like if this is my job to do, I will do it the rest of my life. And I'll be so happy to do it for God. And I can't say I've always been that way, but that's really a servant's heart, is to do the small things that God puts before them, and do them consistently, and do them honestly, and do them before the Lord.
Oh, great. Well, thanks for sharing your story about basically from teenage years to the Arkansas years, and specifically about the ministry of the Underground Fish that's in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and still going today.
Well, I don't know that it's going today, is it?
I was wondering if it is.
No, I don't think so. I think somewhere along there it ran its course. There's other ministries that came in, I'm sure, and have taken, probably have a lot better funding and a lot better, strategy.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, it went from no chairs to a place that was really a ministry at several different levels. Once Dan got behind the helm there, God used him in marvelous ways. And, it's so good to look back and realize that God He's a God of order, but He's a God of love. And He wants people to reach out to the lost. And that's really an important thing. But He also wants discipleship. And I think that's where Dan and his group did a lot better. They had a group of people praying for them, older people, and they had a lot of discipleship going on. So not only did they lead people to Christ, they disciple people to have their whole, walk change. Sometimes, you lead somebody to Christ when you're young and you don't know much, and you never see them again. You don't know what happened in their life. You can only hope that God used that decision they made that day, but boy, discipling him and seeing it happen It's really a whole different level, isn't it?
Wow. Yeah, it is true.